Good morning. I hope everybody's doing well this morning. As Clint mentioned, my name is Shannon Ramsey with the organization Families for Families, and I'm going to talk a little bit about who we are, what we do. But what I want you to hear more than anything this morning is we talk about foster care, we talk about orphan care, we talk about caring for the fatherless. And how I want you to hear how this is a gospel issue. This is not a social services thing out there. This is a gospel issue. This is a God-centered issue that is on the heart of the Father. And as the church, we have to figure out, hey, how can we put ourselves in line with what the Father's doing? And what role does He want us to play in that? And that looks different everywhere. And I hope that's what communicated this morning, and I hope that's what gets unpacked this morning for you. A little bit about me. I'm originally from Georgia. Grew up just up the road in Bullitt County, Statesboro area. Met my wife at Georgia Southern University. And in the midst of all of that, the Lord took us on a journey of being involved in vocational ministry. So we left Georgia Southern and moved off, went to Bible college, eventually seminary, ended up in the metro Atlanta area where I served on staff at some churches, but also went into business for a little while. And so it kind of had my hands in a lot of different things. And then lo and behold, God did something that I never thought He would do. And I say it's Him because it wasn't me. He picked our family up and moved us to the other side of the world. Many of you may be familiar with the organization, the International Mission Board. So we got to serve as one of your International Mission Board missionaries for nearly a decade in the region of South Asia. That's kind of India, Bangladesh, Pakistan, Nepal, that region of the world. Last few years of our time on the field, we actually lived in Bangkok, Thailand, and I would travel back and forth into South Asia and work amongst unreached peoples. Lived in developing country, in that developing country, in that developing region for a while, but then Bangkok was a nice reprieve. It sounds weird to say that, but it had a little bit more infrastructure and provided a little bit more, if you could say, normalcy. We always had a joke that, I'm sorry, this has nothing to do, it's just, this is my little rabbit trail for a second, but South Asia, there's nothing like South Asia in America, okay? Just so you know, there's nothing like it, all right? So stuff would just happen. You're expecting A to happen, but Z happens. You know what I mean? So it's so far away from anything you expect. And so your head just kind of goes, ah. And then all of a sudden you start getting used to life and you go, okay, actually this will tie back around later. And then you get so used to Z happening, you're like, okay, Z's happening, so I'm not expecting A to happen anymore. But then you move to a place like Thailand or Bangkok and live in a city that's a lot more infrastructure, and it kind of lulls you into thinking you're back in the West. Okay, and so you start getting back into thinking A and B is going to happen again, and then something Asian happens, and then your head explodes, and you're just like, what is going on with life? But I didn't know why. I just thought about how that's going to tie back in. But God does that sometimes in messages when you're doing stuff. But listen, then we came back from the mission field in 2019, and we're trying to figure out, hey, what are our next steps? Clint mentioned we've got 3 children. Our oldest 2 are biological. They went overseas with us. They were 6 and 8 when we went overseas. And while we were overseas, we adopted a little boy from China. So orphan care, our journey was adoption from China while we were overseas. And so we came back, and a really good friend of mine, I'm going to talk about him in a minute, but he started Families for Families. I'll give some more of his detail in a moment. But he asked me, he said, Shannon, as you're trying to figure out what your next steps are, would you be interested? I want Families for Families to be statewide. You see, Families for Families, our home office is located in a little town called Loganville, Georgia. It's just east of Atlanta. And he said, hey, we want offices all around the state. Would you be willing to launch our work down in the southeast part of the state? Our family was looking to relocate back to Statesboro because even though we'd lived in Atlanta for a while, we were looking to get closer to home. My family is there. My wife's family was there in Statesboro. And so we're like, hey, this is where we'd like to settle in. And we were asked to kind of launch out in that. And so at the end of 2019 and in 2020, we began that effort. And we started taking Families for Families to this southern part of the state. And here's what our goal is at Families for Families. Our mission and our goal is connecting with local churches to recruit, support faith-based families that can provide loving homes to children in the Georgia foster care system. Let me say that again. Connecting with local churches to recruit and support faith-based families that can provide loving homes to children in the Georgia foster care system. So at a base level, at a base layer of who we are and what we do is we license foster homes. And you say, Shannon, I thought DFACS did that. I thought that's what they were in the business of doing. It is what they're in the business of doing. But guess what? They cannot license enough homes to cover the need in the state of Georgia. And so there are private agencies like ours around the state that provide that service as well. What we do that's different is we provide a lot of support around our families. And again, I hope you'll get to hear a little bit more about that as we continue to go on. But the other thing that's so different about who we are and what we do is we are around the state most Sunday mornings doing exactly what I'm doing now, letting churches know that, hey, there's an issue in our state in the way of needing foster homes. And so we recruit faith-based families only. So we want people we want gospel-loving homes to provide for these children that come into the foster care system. Now, how did Families for Families start? Well, I mentioned a moment ago, he's a really good friend of mine. His name is Wayne Noggle. Well, Families for Families started in the heart of Wayne and Kelly Noggle well in the early 2010s, 10, 11, and 12, when he and his family, they were challenged by reading the book Radical by David Platt and hearing about the need for foster care. And they said, hey, we'll be a foster parent. We don't know what that means, but we'll go do it. And so they began that process with the state. And their home was then licensed as a foster home. And within a matter of about an hour or so after they got a phone call from their agency saying, hey, listen, you're a licensed foster home. Within about an hour or so, they get a phone call saying, hey, we need you to take we're willing to take a little girl into your home. And this is that little girl. We'll flip over. This is Ashley. Ashley, this of course is a little bit after she came into their home, but Ashley was found behind a dumpster in downtown Atlanta. Her mom is homeless. Her mom was a drug addict. She had a number of drugs in her system, and they brought Ashley into their home. And when they brought Ashley into their home, and then Abby. This is Abby. They brought Abby into their home, and then a year later, they get another phone call for this little girl, Ashley. This is Abby's sister. Ashley, like I said, a year later, mom got pregnant again. She was actually in jail when she had Ashley, and they needed a foster home for her. And so they brought Abby and Ashley into their home. They fostered them for about 2 years. Year 3, they get another phone call. Wayne jokingly always tells the story this way. He told his wife not to answer the call. Because just so you know, they have 5 biological children, and so they expanded into bringing Abby and Ashley. So a couple years later, they have Abby and Ashley together, and then they adopt Abby and Ashley. So Abby and Ashley are now Noggles. And we talk about the gospel. Okay, you know what happens when you get adopted in the state of Georgia? A couple things happen to those children. One, they get a new Social Security number. They get a new name, and they get a new Social Security number. They get a new life. You know what that sounds like? That sounds like the gospel, doesn't it? What did the Apostle Paul say? For all things have become new. I'm a new creation, created, and we become new. God makes us new. And so adoption is a great picture of that, even in our secular systems that we have. It shows how God wants to make us new. But Abby and Ashley kind of spurred in his heart to say, I think we can support foster families in a better way. I think we can create a system within the system, because it is a system within the system, to help make sure foster parents have what they need. And what started out as a little office in Loganville, Georgia, now is 8 offices around the state. Our 9th office is that one in the far left-hand corner, that southwest area, is our next region. But these are the number of children. These numbers you see are roughly the number of children in these regions around the state. There are 11,400 kids in the foster care system around the state of Georgia. This is just how we've broken up the map so that we can have a kind of create bite-sized pieces for us to be able to manage, but then also for people to understand. And you guys are in that south central, we call it, region, where you see 1,512 kids. The only regions greater than that are in the northwest corner, and of course what would be the metro Atlanta area. So this region of the state has a huge need. That is children in the Georgia foster care system. So what does that look like? That is children who've been removed by Department of Family Children Services, DFACS. They've been removed and put into one of three places. They've been put into, we all hear about foster homes, but you also hear about group homes. Listen, the Georgia Baptist Group Home is right up the road in Baxley. So those children are a part of these Georgia foster care system. They're also put in what are called ILPs, independent living programs. These are kids who are a little bit older and who have been maybe getting ready to what's called age out. And what aging out of foster care means is they've turned 18 years old, and now they are deemed by the state of Georgia as adults. How many of you realize that 18 is really not an adult? Yeah, the parents said amen. The 17, 18-year-olds are going, wait a minute. Sorry, y'all. You might not quite be ready yet. But these are kids who still need guidance, still need help. And that's what those independent living programs do. Also, if a child is with a foster family, they can still be with a foster family post-18 if they have that support. But what our goal has been to take our vision and take our model of supporting foster families around the state. And we're very thankful today. Listen, around the state, we have roughly 230 children around the state are in our foster homes. Those are homes just like yours that have chosen to become foster parents and care for these children while permanency is being figured out. The number one thing I hear people say to me all the time is, oh, I don't know, I think it'll break my heart if I bring children into my home and then I have to see them go. Yes, it will break your heart. But let me also say, when those children are removed from DFACS, they are going somewhere. They're going to go to a group home. And you know why they go to a group home generally? Because there's not a foster home for them to go to. Or they're going to go to a foster home. Or they're going to go to an independent living program. They're going to go somewhere. Why not be in a gospel-centered home? Why not be in a gospel-centered home? And here's the thing. God has not called us to do easy things. God has not called us to do the things that are convenient even. Listen, I tell people all the time, something I learned as I began working in the foster care system and working with Families for Families is I began learning something about foster families. Foster families have the heart of a missionary. You say, Shannon, why do you say that? Well, because I were one. I were one for 10 years. You say, what does that mean, Shannon? Well, what that means is they're going to lay that blank check out before the Lord and say, whatever you want, Lord. And they're going to do something that their family is going to say, you're crazy. They're going to do something that all the people around them are going to say, why in the world would you do this? It's going to be very difficult. They're going to do something that's going to disrupt their family rhythm. If you're used to Taco Tuesday every Tuesday as a family, you may lose Taco Tuesday on Tuesday being a foster parent. You know why? Because those children may be coming back from a visit. And you know what happens when kids come back foster kids come back from a visit with their biological parents, their attitudes just aren't like they were before they went on that visit. It's not because the biological parents did anything wrong. It's because they're children, and they're going through a transitional piece of going from their biological parents for a few hours, and now they're back to your house, and they don't know how to process all of that, and so their behaviors go wacky. So Taco Tuesday becomes Turbulent Tuesday. You know? But a foster parent is doing that which no one else wants to do. And that's what a missionary does. I remember in around 2006, 2007, when God was stirring in my family's heart, and He was saying, hey, I want you to go serve me overseas. And I had only made trips to Asia, to Europe. I'd been to several places in Europe and things that would be somewhat Western and familiar to me. And when my wife and I got involved in the process, we were looking, and one of the places we began looking at was Central Asia. I can say that. It was Afghanistan, believe it or not. Now, this was in the early, like 2006, 7, and 8. Anybody remember what was going on pretty hard and heavy during that time in Afghanistan? Well, there were Christian workers there during that time, and it became the great argument whenever we did go to Asia still, and I had to tell my in-laws, well, we were going to go to Afghanistan, but we just decided to go here instead, you know, as if it was a step down. But people thought we were crazy. And the best question I got was, are you taking your kids? No, we're just going to leave them underneath that bypass over there. Can you drop some food off every now and then for them while they're... Yes, we're taking our children. What are you going to do with them? They're going to be with us and doing life with us. But you know what? It was tough. It was hard. You know. Listen, I'm a good old boy from South Georgia, and I grew up with the heat of South Georgia. Y'all know what August and July are like around here. You know, it's tough. It ain't much better, just a little bit further. Listen, we think Statesboro's north. It ain't that far north, okay? It's still just as hot up there as it is down here. And that's just what most of my year was like without air conditioning. In most cases, living in South Asia. And then the food, it was extremely different. I was doing things. People thought I was nuts. They thought we were crazy. But we were doing what God had just told us to do. You know? And that season was over in 2019, and we came back. But for foster parents, that's something I learned about foster parents, is they have this heart of caring for kids who are in need of care. Because when a child is removed from their biological family, for whatever reason, the number one reason is neglect. Okay, what does neglect look like? Look, it can take many forms, but one of the ways that we've seen it happen is a 4-year-old gets left in an apartment by themselves for an extended period of time. For any period of time really is neglect, but for an extended period of time, so much so that they find themselves making their way out into the apartment complex until the police are called because they don't know where this little child belongs. The police show up, and then DFACS gets involved, and those kids come into care. Neglect and even abuse. What is abuse? Well, abuse can be a number of different things. But it can be children, parents who just simply are not equipped for parenting and try to contain a 2-year-old by putting them in a soft dog kennel, a soft dog kennel cage, just to contain them while they go off and do what they need to do. Abuse and neglect can be a sibling set of 4 being left in a bedroom while dad goes off to work all day, and them having to fend for themselves, and the kids being from the ages of 4 down to 1. All of those are stories that we deal with. And that's just neglect and abuse. And there are other extremes to that. But here's the thing. God wants to use faith-based families to help care for these kids. Now, it's not easy, okay? Don't ever hear me say it's not easy, that it's easy. It is not easy. But there's some scripture that kind of help us to understand what's going on in these situations and why it's so difficult. One of those is 1 Peter 5:8. Peter says to the church, he goes, be sober-minded, be watchful. Why? Because your adversary, the devil, prowls around like a roaring lion seeking someone to devour. You know what? Something we've learned about in our culture and our society around us is that the enemy is out for the family. The enemy is out for the family. We see it all around us. We see it all around us. We see the decline of the family. We see confusion amongst children today. Why is that? Because of breakdown of the family. And the enemy wants to go after the family. But what the enemy has realized is if he can take out one member of the family, the rest of it will crumble. And you know who it is? It's the dad. It's the men. Ladies, I am not trying to diminish your role in the family, but the way that God has designed the family and designed the household is such that the man is the protector. The man is the one who is a caregiver for the family. And what the enemy has figured out is that if he could take out the dad, the rest will crumble. You know, the majority of these kids who come into care, they come from fatherless homes. I don't know if you realize it, but there's an epidemic in our culture for fatherless homes. Because the enemy has realized a couple things with some facts. 63% of youth suicides come from fatherless homes. 90% of all homeless and runaway children, they're from fatherless homes. 85%, hold on a second, homeless and runaways. Hold on. 85% of all children who show behavior disorders, they come from fatherless homes. 80% of rapists, they come from, with anger problems, they come from fatherless homes. 71% of all high school dropouts come from fatherless homes. 75% of all adolescent patients in chemical abuse centers, they come from fatherless homes. I thought this was interesting. Now, I'm a guy saying this, but I was watching a video talking about, the need for fathers in the home, and there was a lady giving these statistics. She made the comment, I wish I'd have got her name, but she was at a conference and she was talking about a lot of these same things. She made the comment. She said, do you realize that if you have a single parent household, that these statistics flip if the single parent is a dad? I don't understand it. I don't fully grasp all of it. That's something that God has designed and put in to provide leadership to the home, but something that I have seen and something that I have observed. My wife used to work for a women's outpatient recovery program in our area. So these were women who were dealing with drug addiction and dealing with difficulties, and they were single mothers. And many of their children were in foster care, and they were trying to get their children back into their homes. And the system, and I hear people say the system is working against these people. And I had to tell my wife, I said, honey, it's not the system working against these people. It's that the enemy has broken down the family, and the ramifications of that are playing out with these single mothers who are trying to raise these kids. I'm not saying that single moms can't do a good job. I'm just saying if you look at the statistics of everything, you put a dad in place and these statistics flip. But what my wife was beginning to see with these women who were trying to get back on their feet because they had disarray in their lives is they had to go to if they did have their children with them, their kids were at daycare. And then, not that daycare is wrong, but the kids were in daycare. The women had to go to a outpatient recovery program because they were mandated to be there for some court order. They also were trying to go to work. They were also trying to go to other meetings that they were required to have every day, like an AA meeting or something like that. And then, oh, by the way, they had to be home by 8 o'clock. How much time do they have to go work during the day to help provide for those children? Not much. So the system's going to the cultural ramifications are working against them and not providing what these families need to survive. But what we need to understand is that God has had a plan for the orphan or for the fatherless. And when you look at Scripture in the Old Testament, you'll see the orphan and the widow going together. And what the orphan or the fatherless really kind of translates into is one who is without a guide. It's the way that God set the family up. The husband, men, we are the leaders of our homes, and we need to take that role. We need to embrace it, and we need to have an impact on our family because that's what God has given us. But all the way back in Exodus chapter 22, Moses writes this: you shall not mistreat, God is speaking, you shall not mistreat any widow or fatherless child. If you do mistreat them and they cry out to me, I will surely hear them. You see, God is setting up the nation of Israel. He's setting up an infrastructure in place for the orphan and the widow to be cared for. He's saying, listen, you are my people. Who are his people today? The church. You are my people. When the orphan or the widow are placed into a vulnerable situation, we have to then, his people have to come in and help. They have to come in and help. Isaiah chapter 1 verse 17 says, learn to do good, seek justice, correct oppression, bring justice to the fatherless, and plead the widow's cause. You see, the breakdown in the culture had happened again, and God was speaking through his prophet to say, listen, you need to make a difference in this. The people of God need to step in and help. And it was such a big deal that the half-brother of Jesus, James, writes in the New Testament, which is probably the most popular verse of all that in regards to the subject, is religion that is pure and undefiled before the Father is this, to visit widows and orphans and widows in their affliction, and to keep oneself unstained from the world. Do you realize why it is considered to be pure and undefiled religion to care for the widows and orphans? Because when you do that work, you don't get anything in return. We are in a consumer-based culture here in the West where we want to get a ROI, a return on our investment. We want to get, if nothing else, can we get a feel-good feeling? But it's hard to get a feel-good feeling when you care for that foster kid who's in your home, and if they're old enough, they may have just cussed you out. If they're young enough, they may have just tore up their bedroom. There's nothing in return. It is sacrificial giving. It is sacrificial living that God has called us to in this world of foster care and caring for the widows. Listen, in the biblical times, the widow was in a bad spot. We have an entire book in the Bible, in the Old Testament, that deals with the plight of a widow. It's the book of Ruth. And we see how two widows really, are trying to figure out how to live and survive. And it's not popular, I'm not misogynistic to say this, but they realized they needed a man to help them in the situation that they were in. That doesn't make one greater than anybody. It's just, that's the way God has designed it, to help bring things together, to be their protector, to be their guide, so that they can be cared for and survive in the culture that God's given us. Again, this is not to diminish any roles. This is just simply to say these are parameters and guidelines that God has brought together. And this is not to say that someone can't overcome the odds. Absolutely. Listen, of anybody that can think somebody can overcome the odds, I am a big proponent of that. Listen, I'm an endurance runner. I like to do things that are crazy and weird and things that are hard. And I hang out with people that do that. Absolutely. It can be overcome. But the simple fact of the matter is that the statistics work against all that overcoming. Can it happen? Absolutely. But the statistics don't work in their favor. Listen, God has called the church to be a part in helping take care of these children in foster care. He has called individual families and sometimes singles to help care for kids while they are in need. Why? Because it is a part of the sacrificial living that He's all called us to. And here's what's really interesting. I made the comment earlier, there's over 11,000 children in the Georgia foster care system here in the state of Georgia. Do you realize there are twice as many churches in Georgia as there are kids in the foster care system? There are 22,000 Protestant churches in our state. This is a church solvable problem. This is a church solvable problem. But what we need to realize is, and I think I showed you a little bit of these numbers and how things are spread out around the state earlier on, but let me kind of pull things in a little bit more to help you see what's going on in the background. And we think it's an Atlanta problem. We think it's the big city problem, but it's all around here, even in our own backyard. You see, this week in Georgia, do you realize that 2 girls who were abused and neglected and placed in de facto custody could potentially be sold or end up in sex trafficking? So Clint, before y'all come back to church next Sunday, this could take place in the state of Georgia. Statistically, it's taking place. 8.6 children will go missing from the Georgia de facto foster care system. They will go missing. Let's sit on that for just a second. Clint, let me ask you a question. There's a little girl in the back row back there. What would happen this week if she went missing? Manhunt. There'd be a manhunt. You'd be on the news, wouldn't you? You know why these kids go missing and stay missing and end up in sex trafficking? Nobody's looking for them. Nobody's looking for them. Let that sink in for just a minute. 7 girls will turn 18 and age out of foster care. Again, I talked about that earlier. That means they essentially become homeless. They essentially become homeless. And 5 of these girls will be pregnant within a year and put kids back into the foster care system. 7 boys will turn 18 and age out of foster care. 5.6 of these boys will go to jail for survival crimes. What is a survival crime? They're robbing the local convenience store to get something to eat, not to have a big flat screen on the wall of wherever they're at. And they may even sell drugs. You know why they're selling drugs? To get money so they can go buy something to eat. Families for Families, we will deny 46 children due to the lack of foster homes available in the state of Georgia. Listen, last year we said yes over 250 times across the state of Georgia. What that means is when children come into foster care, DFACS and the court system remove the children from their biological homes. And then they call agencies like ours. Every day we get text messages, emails, or phone calls from various counties around the state saying, Shannon, do you have a foster home for these children? I was doing this a couple weeks ago, and it was actually in last year, and I was speaking at a church, and literally while I was in their foyer, I had a table, and we set a table up, and while I was there setting up, I got a call for 2 kids that morning before I even got up to go speak. We get them every day. Every day. We were able to say yes over 250 times last year. But you know what the sad reality is? We said no 2,436 times. Now, those kids went somewhere, but we like to say yes. And how do we say yes? By having enough foster homes. By having enough foster homes. But on average, it comes out to be about 46 times a week we say no. Atlanta will remain one of the highest cities in the nation in regards to sex trafficking. Listen, it's all fun and all exciting when I love college football. And it's all exciting when we see a SEC championship being played in October. It's all exciting when we see the Peach Bowl being played in December, 1st of January. It's all exciting to have the national championship being played at the Mercedes-Benz Dome in Atlanta. But you know what was going on in the background and in the shadows of that building? October, November, December, and January of this year? Stuff like this. Stuff like this. That's going on in the background of those big events. And last, 70% of girls who are sex trafficked, they come out of foster care. Listen, we talk about serving our communities. We talk about serving and wanting to help end sex trafficking. We want to talk about helping end homelessness. You know how you can do that? You can get upstream of it. Help stop it before it even happens. And foster care is one of those pathways. Foster care is one of those pathways. Listen, here's what's going on in your little neck of the woods right here. Go to the next one. Maybe my slide didn't make it in. Is there one that says children in care? I apologize. I thought I had it in there. I'll come back to that other graphic slide in a minute. But in the counties that surround Bacon County, Jeff Davis County has 18 kids in foster care. Right next door in Coffee County, there's 205 children in foster care. Ware County, just south of you, is 125 kids. Pierce County has 75. Appling has 40, and Bacon rounds it out with 39 kids in the foster care system. So 502 children in the counties surrounding you right here in Bacon County. The need is great. Go back to that slide that says South Central Region. This is something that's kind of interesting. I had a CASA worker share some of this information, and then we went and dug and actually found out and got some of the bigger details. Listen, in your region, this is what we call our South Central Region, you have almost 640,000 people in this area here. And you know what's interesting? There's a swamp that goes through the middle of all that. So there's a whole area. There ain't even any people here, you know. But there are 1,500 kids in foster care. And there are 8 agencies like ours in this region. Most of them are all over in Lowndes County near Valdosta. There's only one over in Glenn County. Fulton and DeKalb County, 1.8 million people. There's 927 kids in foster care. And there are 28 agencies like ours in those 2 counties. You've got almost, it's not quite 2 times, but a little shy of 2 times the kids in this region with half the population. This is not an Atlanta issue. This is a statewide issue. And we want to try and figure out how to be an answer to that. So how can you get involved? Okay, we don't want to just talk about the problem because we can get bogged down, and it's sad. It is very sad, but there's a solution to that. And that is, becoming a foster parent. Listen, maybe you're here this morning and you're just hearing about this for the first time. Just let it sink in. Just let it sink in. Pray about it. See what God wants you to do. It may be to be a foster parent. Listen, I used to live in a third world country. I used to come back and I would speak in churches and try to raise awareness for international missions and try to even recruit people to come. I was never naive enough to think that most of the people or a majority of the people, I always knew that very few, if any, would ever want to go do that. Because you know what? God's not called everybody to be a missionary in a third world country. And that's okay. God's not called everybody to be a foster parent. But He has called many people to do that. And many times we don't go or we don't go do because we've not been challenged. And we need to at least be exposed to it. We need to at least be thinking, hey, is this something that God wants me to do? We need to be asking the question of our family. And so my challenge this morning is just simply this. Is that what God might be calling you to do? If it's not that, what else could it be? Well, this is what makes us different at Families for Families. When we go into an area and we set up and we start recruiting foster families, we want to really make sure that they succeed in what they're doing. We're not perfect every time, but we want to walk with them and help support them along the way. DFACS, families that go through DFACS to become foster parents, DFACS in the state of Georgia has a 50% retention rate of foster parents within 1 year. So 5 out of every 10 families that start the process and they become foster parents, after the first year, they quit when they're a DFACS foster home. We at Families for Families, we have an 80% retention rate of families after 1 year. Why is that? Because we support our families. We have full-time case management staff that support our families. So you say, where is that for this area? Well, our office is down at the Bridge Church, right down the road in Blackshear. That's where our office is. We have a staff member that works there, works out of there, and works in this region to support our families as one of our caseworkers. But we also work to provide opportunities for churches to get involved. One of those is called a date night. So how can people get involved? So we actually Bridge hosted our first date night back in November last year in this region. As we've started this office, we work to try to help meals to be provided, and we do that through church partnership. We look to have mentors or babysitters for our foster families. We look for prayer partners. We look for people to take on a role, maybe of a handyman. You say, what is that, Shannon? Listen, a foster family, it's going to go into this meals and this handyman thing. So listen, foster parents, they're picking the kids up from daycare. They're getting them to a doctor's appointment, potentially a therapy appointment. The kids potentially coming back from or going to a visit with their biological families. All of these different things are going on, and that eats up their time than what a normal family would do with their biological children. Okay, it just takes more time to do those things. So to have a frozen meal to be able to give to a foster family where one night a week they know they preheat the oven 450 degrees, sit it in there for an hour, and they got a lasagna, or if you're lactose intolerant, maybe it's shepherd's pie, I don't know, whatever, that's a huge benefit. Babysitters, the same thing. Babysitters have to be 18 to help babysit for foster family. But handyman, same deal. You know what happens in the summertime with these foster families is they're doing all these things. Next thing you know, their grass is up to your calves, and they can't get to cutting their grass. So what if a youth group or a group of men just went and cut grass to some foster parents, a couple times during the summer, just to help out, And you know what's crazy? If you ever call a foster parent and you say, hey, what do you need? Or just call me if you need something. You know what they're going to do? They're going to say, I got it. You know why? Because A, they're busy and can't think. They don't need to be thinking about it. They're just like, I don't know what I need, so I'm good. Just leave me alone. Not leave me alone in a negative way, but it's just like, they're so caught up in everything. They can sometimes. So for our meal people, it's like, hey, I'm bringing a meal. What day do you want it? You know what I mean? It's not a matter of if, but a matter of when. Handyman, same thing. Hey, we're coming over to cut your grass this week. What day works for you? Sometimes whenever I go and we've placed kids in some of our homes, sometimes they need a crib. Well, I've done this on a number of occasions where we go there and I either take a crib or they've got one there or a bed or something, and then you spend 30 minutes putting a crib together. You say, Shannon, you can do it in 30 minutes? I've gotten it down to about 30 minutes because I've put enough of them together now. And they come pretty easily there. You got to have the right drill gun too. It's like, and you're good. But you can do, help them put those things together. Be a family friend. Take the foster kids. So let's just hypothetically say that New City Church had a family that was fostering. Well, maybe one of the other families could, a couple times a month, take those foster kids to their house on Sunday afternoon just to give them a break, and help take care of them along the way. We provide birthday bags. We put together diaper drives. So when our case managers go to visit, many times, if not all the time, they're taking diapers with them to help our foster parents out. A respite home. What is a respite home? A respite home is a home that you're a fully licensed foster family, but you're only taking care of those foster kids. You're helping take care of foster kids of other foster parents throughout the year. So say it's, say it's for a long weekend, or say it's for a week at a time. You're just bringing those kids into your home, and that's when you're doing that. These are various ways that the church can get involved. These are various ways that the church can get involved. And that's why we want to give the church handles on how they can help. You say, Shannon, I can't foster. Okay, well, there's a list. What else can we do? We want to say, what can we say yes to? What can we say yes to? Let's not focus on what we can't do. I mentioned earlier, I'm an adoptive parent. And people ask me, say, Shannon, why do you do this? Well, this little boy right here, this is when he was 2. This was just before we got him. James is 10 now and doing great. Just for all y'all, listen, I was the jock football player in high school, played a little bit in college. I'm in a new world now, having kids of my own, and they're doing various things. So yesterday, James has gotten into, he's a part of a chess club. So I had a chess club meeting at my house yesterday. And I'm going, huh? That's different for me. But, that's what he's into, and that's what he's doing. So he had 3 of his buddies on his chess club team come over, and he's actually playing in a state tournament this week up in Macon. But James is one of the reasons I do, and I'm so passionate about this. Now, this was an international adoption. It's not foster care. Adoption is not the same as foster care. But this was my pathway to caring for the orphan and for the fatherless. God's got a different journey for different folks. Listen, I want you to do something real quick. Here's my information. I got a card out there. If you want to take a picture of this, it's got my name, my phone number, and my email. You can take a picture of that. Again, I've got some cards over on the side. But if you want to know, hey, how can New City Church maybe get more involved? We're going to talk about that after the service day at over lunch, and just kind of a working lunch of just kind of chatting, asking some questions, and unpacking some more of this. But you may be sitting here this morning and going, man, I've thought about foster care, and I might be interested in that more. We could talk about that after the service, but I want to make you aware of this next slide. There's a QR code. That didn't translate well, did it? You ever translate a PowerPoint and things just don't go well? If you want to join us, we have a virtual information session. Basically, this is your first step in working with us and becoming a foster parent. That QR code will take you to our website. The first and third Tuesday night of every month, we host one of these. This is where you log on and you join other families who are interested in becoming foster parents, and you go through the first 1-hour training of what is required for that. And you're given a lot more deep dive issues and dealing with becoming a foster parent. And if you want to be a respite parent, I mentioned that is the next, that is also something you would attend. But that is there for you guys as well. Listen, this morning, as we're thinking about what has God called us to do, listen, God has utmostly called us to take the gospel to all nations, so that the unreached, and so that those who have not heard the gospel can hear the gospel. A win for Families is our office, our team getting a phone call on a Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and 2 children or more coming into care into a foster parent's home, and then them showing up in your children's ministry on a Sunday morning. That's a win. Because at the end of the day, if all we can provide is food and a bed for these kids, they've got an eternity to look forward to. And it's in one of 2 ways. And we want to have them exposed to gospel-centered homes so that they can get the gospel, so that no matter how bad it is here, they've got glory to look forward to. And that's a win. That is the heartbeat of Families for Families and everything that we do. Listen, I've been talking about foster care. I've talked a little bit about missions, but I've talked about all these things. But at the end of the day, God has called us simply to be obedient to Him. And I don't know what that is for you this morning. But what I want us to do as we go into a time of just reflection is understanding that God has something He wants for us to do. And I don't know what that is. But you do, because He's speaking to you. And this morning I want you to just take some time to think through what He has for you and what your next step is. If it's in foster care with us, great. If maybe He spurred you in your heart, man, we need to do this at our church, and I want to lead out in that. Man, great. May not have anything to do with foster care. Sometimes, just like earlier with rabbit trails, they just happen. But God wants to use you for His kingdom in some way, shape, or form. And the question is, what are we going to say yes to? Let me pray.